The orbital defense station above New Haven Colony blinked with its usual green lights, marking another peaceful evening for its inhabitants. Tom Reed, the night shift operator, sipped his warm coffee while watching the sensor displays. The colony below slept soundly, its biodomes glowing softly in the dark. Everything seemed normal, just like any other night in the past 5 years since the colony's establishment. The first warning came as a slight ripple in the long-range sensors. Tom almost missed it, thinking it was just another piece of space debris. But then another ripple appeared, followed by 3 more. His hands moved quickly across the control panel as he zoomed in on the disturbance. What he saw made his coffee cup slip from his fingers and shatter on the floor. Control station to Governor Thomas. Emergency. Multiple unknown ships approaching from Sector 7. His voice shook as he watched more and more signals appear on his screen. The ships moved in a pattern he had never seen before, like a swarm of angry insects. Governor Thomas's sleepy voice came through the communication system. "What do you mean, unknown ships? The trade fleet isn't due for another 2 weeks." "Sir, these aren't trade ships." Tom's voice dropped to a whisper as the first visual images came through. "They're dark swarm." The word spread through the colony like wildfire. Within minutes, emergency sirens blared through every biodome. The dark swarm, the stuff of nightmares, stories told to scare children. Their ships looked like giant space-borne insects, made of living tissue instead of metal, powered by a hive mind that made them move as one deadly unit. The colony's defense fleet, just 4 ships strong, scrambled to respond. They were simple patrol vessels, meant to deal with pirates and guide lost traders, not face one of the most feared species in known space. Captain Bill of the lead ship, Star Guard, knew they stood little chance. But they had to try. "All ships, defensive formation Delta," he ordered, positioning his small fleet between the colony and the approaching swarm. Buy time for the evacuation. The first dark swarm ships entered weapons range. They were beautiful in a terrifying way, their bioorganic hulls shifting colors like oil on water. The smallest was twice the size of the largest colony ship, its surface covered in what looked like pulsing veins. "Sir," one of Tom's operators shouted from the defense station, "they're launching some kind of spores." Thousands of tiny objects shot from the dark swarm ships, each one glowing with a sickly green light. They moved faster than any normal missile, changing direction in ways that ignored the laws of physics. The colony's automated defense systems opened fire, laser batteries trying to track and destroy the threats, but there were too many. The first spores hit the outermost defense satellite. Instead of exploding, they latched on and began to spread, covering the satellite in a web of living tissue. Within seconds, the satellite's signals went dark. More spores struck the other defensive positions, systematically dismantling the colony's outer defenses. Governor Thomas stood in the colony's command center, watching through the reinforced windows as flashes of light marked the battle above. "Begin immediate evacuation," he ordered, his voice steady despite the fear in his eyes. "Priority to children and medical patients. All civilian ships are hereby authorized for evacuation duty." The colony erupted into controlled chaos. People grabbed what they could carry, heading for the emergency shelters and spacecraft bays. The militia, led by Jack Cooper, helped maintain order, directing families and ensuring no one was left behind. In orbit, Captain Bill watched another of his ships fall to the dark swarm's biological weapons. The enemy ships moved with impossible coordination, each one knowing exactly what the others would do. His remaining vessels couldn't even scratch their living hulls. "This is Captain Bill to all colony forces," he transmitted. "We can't hold them. I repeat, we cannot hold them. Get those people out of there." Tom Reed stayed at his post in the defense station, relaying urgent distress calls on all frequencies. "This is New Haven Colony calling any Allied ships. We are under attack by dark swarm forces. Women and children aboard evacuation vessels. Request immediate military support. Please, if anyone can hear us." The dark swarm ships pressed their attack, their formation spreading out to cut off escape routes. They had done this dozens of times before to other colonies. They would take their time, knowing their prey was trapped. After all, no help could arrive in time to make a difference. They were wrong. The colony's last defensive ship shuddered as another bioweapon struck its hull. Captain Bill gripped his command chair, watching as green tendrils spread across his viewport. His crew worked frantically to keep their systems running, but the living matter was eating through their armor like acid through paper. "Engine room, give me everything you've got," he shouted into the ship's comm system. "We need to clear a path for those evacuation ships." Below, in New Haven Colony, Jack Cooper led a group of civilians toward the underground bunkers. The sounds of battle echoed through the biodome's walls, making children cry and adults jump at every boom and crash. His militia members helped carry the elderly and guided the confused toward safety. "Keep moving," Jack called out, his voice steady despite his fear. "Follow the green lights. Don't stop, don't look back." Through the dome's transparent sections, they could see the dark swarm ships moving into position. Their massive forms blocked out the stars, their bioorganic hulls pulsing with eerie light. Smaller creatures, like flying jellyfish, dropped from the larger ships and began attaching themselves to the dome's outer surface. In the defense station, Tom Reed watched in horror as his sensors showed the colony's shields failing section by section. The dark swarm's biological weapons were unlike anything their defenses were designed to handle. Each attack seemed to learn from the last, adapting to overcome whatever resistance they put up. "Governor Thomas," Tom called through the emergency channel. "Sectors 3 through 7 have lost shield coverage. The evacuation ships won't be able to launch from those areas." The governor's voice crackled back, thick with static. "Redirect everyone to the central launch bay. We'll have to crowd them in, but it's better than leaving them behind." Captain Bill's ship, the Star Guard, made one last desperate attempt to break through the dark swarm's blockade. His weapons were nearly depleted, his engines struggling against the biological growth spreading across the hull. But he could see the first civilian ships rising from the colony's surface, packed with terrified refugees. "All power to forward shields," he ordered. "Plot a collision course with their largest ship. Let's give these people a chance." His crew didn't hesitate. They knew what was at stake. The Star Guard's engines flared bright as it charged toward the nearest dark swarm vessel, its remaining weapons firing continuously. The enemy ship turned its attention toward them, launching a fresh wave of biological weapons. Jack Cooper and his militia had just sealed the last group of civilians in the central launch bay when the whole colony shook. Looking up through the reinforced windows, he saw the Star Guard explode in a brilliant flash of light. The blast damaged the nearest dark swarm ship, creating a brief gap in their formation. "Launch now." Governor Thomas's voice boomed through all channels. "All civilian ships, take off immediately. Use the opening." A stream of ships rose from the colony's surface, their engines straining under the weight of too many passengers. The dark swarm, momentarily confused by the unexpected suicide attack, took precious seconds to reorganize their forces. But it wasn't enough. The biological weapons were already burning through the colony's main dome. The remaining defensive turrets fired uselessly at the approaching swarm ships, their energy beams absorbed by the living hulls. Tom Reed stayed at his post, continuing to broadcast distress signals even as the defense station's power began to fail. "This is New Haven Colony. We have multiple civilian ships trying to break orbit. Request immediate assistance from any military vessels in range. Please, they're targeting our evacuation ships." The first civilian ship to reach space was immediately caught in a web of biological matter. Its engines died, and the people inside screamed as living tendrils began breaking through the hull. Two more ships managed to slip past, but the dark swarm were quick to pursue. Governor Thomas watched from his command center as his colony fell apart around him. Half the biodomes were breached, the defensive grid was offline, and most of their ships were either destroyed or captured. Their last hope lay with the few vessels that might escape to warn others. Then his sensor operator shouted something that made everyone freeze. New contact. Massive energy signature just appeared at the system's edge. It's coming in fast. The Dark Swarm noticed it too. For the first time since the attack began, their perfect formation wavered. The unknown ship cut through space like a knife, its hull gleaming with a metallic shine that stood out against the organic shapes of the Dark Swarm fleet. It was long and angular, built with sharp edges and covered in what looked like heavy armor plating. Red stripes ran along its sides, and bold white letters spelled out its name. HUNDRCA. In the colony's defense station, Tom Reed's eyes widened as his sensors picked up the ship's identification signal. It's a human warship. I've never seen one in person before. The Dark Swarm ships shifted their formation slightly, turning a portion of their swarm to face the newcomer. They had never encountered a human military vessel before, but their hive mind had already decided this single ship couldn't possibly change the outcome of their attack. Inside the Thunderchild's bridge, Captain Ann Walker stood calmly at her command station. Her crew worked with practiced efficiency, their hands flying over control panels as they assessed the situation. "Status report," she ordered, her voice steady and firm. "Multiple civilian ships under attack, Captain," her sensor officer reported. "Colony defenses are almost completely down. We're picking up distress calls from all channels." Walker nodded, her eyes narrowing as she studied the tactical display. "Send to all colony frequencies. This is Captain Walker of the Earth warship Thunderchild. We are moving to assist. Hold on." The message brought hope to the terrified colonists. In the command center, Governor Thomas had heard stories about human military capabilities, but he'd always thought they were exaggerated. Now he was about to find out the truth. The Dark Swarm launched their first attack against the Thunderchild, sending a wave of biological weapons toward the human ship. The glowing spores streaked through space, their patterns designed to overwhelm any normal defense system. But the Thunderchild wasn't normal. Its point defense grid came alive, filling space with a web of precise laser fire. Each spore was picked off with incredible accuracy, creating a beautiful but deadly light show. "Interesting weapons they've got there," Walker commented, watching the biological attacks disintegrate. "But let's show them something from Earth. All batteries. Fire pattern Delta 6. The Thunderchild's response shocked everyone watching. Instead of traditional energy weapons, the ship launched what looked like hundreds of small metal objects. The Dark Swarm ignored them at first, their bioships easily able to absorb such tiny projectiles. That was a mistake. The objects suddenly split apart, each one becoming a cloud of razor-sharp fragments. They tore through the living hulls of the nearest Dark Swarm ships, shredding the organic material like paper. The hive mind had never encountered physical weapons of this type before, and their usual defensive measures proved useless. "Direct hit," Walker's weapons officer reported with satisfaction. "Their biological armor has no defense against tungsten scatter shots." The Dark Swarm ships reeled from the unexpected attack, their perfect formation breaking for the first time. 3 of their smaller vessels were already drifting, their hulls torn open to space. The hive mind struggled to adapt to this new threat, trying to analyze the human ship's capabilities. In the colony below, people crowded around view screens showing the battle. They watched in amazement as the single human ship moved with incredible speed and precision, its weapons blazing. The Thunderchild's maneuvers seemed impossible, using the debris from destroyed Dark Swarm ships as cover while continuing its attack. "This is Captain Walker to all colony ships." Her voice came through clear and strong. "We're going to clear you a path. When I give the signal, make a run for the system's edge. We'll cover your escape." The Dark Swarm launched another wave of attacks, this time trying to surround the Thunderchild. Their ships moved to cut off any escape routes, confident that their superior numbers would prevail. Walker allowed herself a small smile. "They think we're trapped." "Helm," Show them why you don't corner a human ship. Execute maneuver Crazy Ivan. The Thunderchild's engines flared brilliantly as it began a move that would prove humans had their own kind of hive mind, one built from centuries of warfare, countless action movies, and an endless ability to think outside the box. The Thunderchild's engines cut out completely, letting the ship drift in space. The Dark Swarm ships moved closer, thinking they had somehow disabled the human vessel. Then, in a move that seemed to defy physics, the Thunderchild fired its maneuvering thrusters in rapid sequence, making the massive warship spin on its axis like a top. All weapons fire as they bear, Walker commanded. The spinning ship's guns blazed in every direction, catching the surrounding Dark Swarm vessels in a storm of metal and energy. The biological ships had no defense against this impossible attack pattern, their living hulls being shredded as the Thunderchild turned their encirclement attempt against them. In the colony's command center, Governor Thomas watched in amazement. "They're using their own ship like a giant buzzsaw," he said in disbelief. "Who would even think of something like that?" The Dark Swarm hive mind struggled to understand what it was seeing. Their strategy had always relied on surrounding their enemies, but this human ship seemed to want them to do exactly that. Every time they thought they had the Thunderchild trapped, it would pull off another impossible maneuver. "Launch rescue shuttles," Walker ordered as her ship continued its deadly spin. "Get those colonists while the Dark Swarm are confused." Small craft shot out from the Thunderchild's launch bays, racing toward the stranded civilian ships. The Dark Swarm tried to intercept the rescue mission, but Walker had another surprise ready. "Deploy chaff clouds," she commanded. Space filled with what looked like metallic snow, blocking the bioship's sensor organs. The rescue shuttles slipped through the chaos, reaching the disabled colony vessels. Tom Reed, still at his post in the defense station, couldn't believe what his sensors were showing. The Thunderchild was now using the colony's orbital debris field like a weapon, its guns targeting pieces of space junk and sending them flying into the Dark Swarm formation at incredible speeds. They're not just fighting the Dark Swarm, he realized. They're using everything around them as a weapon, even the battlefield itself. The largest Dark Swarm ship, frustrated by its inability to predict the human vessel's actions, launched a massive wave of biological weapons. The spores formed into a solid wall, trying to trap the Thunderchild against the planet's gravity. Walker's response surprised everyone again. Instead of trying to destroy the wall of spores, she ordered her ship straight toward it. The Thunderchild's hull began to glow red-hot as it accelerated. "Are they insane?" Governor Thomas shouted. "They'll never survive ramming that barrier." But the Thunderchild wasn't trying to ram through. At the last second, it used the planet's gravity like a slingshot, whipping around in a tight arc that no ship that size should have been able to manage. The maneuver sent it shooting past the barrier and straight up through the middle of the Dark Swarm formation. The hive mind, which had concentrated its ships to block the expected ramming attempt, now found its forces split in two. The Thunderchild's guns blazed again, this time targeting the exposed rear sections of the bioships, where their armor was weakest. Rescue shuttles report all survivors recovered, Walker's comm officer announced. Colony ships are moving to safe distance. The Dark Swarm launched more attacks, but their usual perfect coordination was failing. The human ships' random, unpredictable movements made it impossible for their hive mind to plan effectively. Every time they adapted to one tactic, the Thunderchild would switch to something completely different. Walker allowed herself a grim smile as she watched the enemy's formation continue to break down. "Send to all frequencies. This is how humans fight. We don't follow your rules. We don't think like you think. And we're just getting started." The remaining Dark Swarm ships began to pull back, trying to regroup. Their hive mind was facing something it had never encountered before. An enemy it couldn't predict or understand. An enemy that seemed to ignore the basic principles of space combat that every other species followed. In the defense station, Tom Reed watched in awe as the Thunderchild began its next attack run. "They're not just winning. he said to himself. They're changing the whole game. Captain Walker's voice cut through the battle chaos, broadcasting to all remaining colony ships. This is Thunderchild. Any vessels with working weapons, form up on our position. We're not just running away. We're taking back your colony. The few surviving ships from the colony's defense fleet, along with some armed merchant vessels, moved to join the human warship. Their crews were tired and scared, but seeing the Thunderchild in action had given them new hope. Listen carefully, Walker continued, her voice calm and steady. The Dark Swarm think as one mind, but that's their weakness. They can't handle multiple different attack patterns at once. Here's what we're going to do. The Dark Swarm watched as the small fleet gathered around the human ship. Their hive mind calculated that even with the Thunderchild's impressive capabilities, such a small force couldn't pose a serious threat to their remaining ships. They were wrong again. Each colony ship took up a different position, following Walker's plan. Some moved high, others low. Some charged straight ahead, while others held back. There was no pattern to it, nothing the hive mind could predict or counter effectively. Now, Walker ordered, everyone attack in your own way. Don't coordinate, don't try to work together. Just hit them however you think best. The result was chaos, exactly what Walker wanted. The Dark Swarm's greatest strength was their unity, but now they faced 24 ships all fighting in completely different ways. Every time their hive mind adapted to one threat, 3 more would strike from unexpected angles. Tom Reed, watching from the defense station, finally understood. They're fighting like humans now, he said in awe. Every ship doing its own thing, being unpredictable. The Dark Swarm can't handle it. The Thunderchild led by example, pulling off maneuvers that seemed to ignore the laws of physics. Walker had her ship spin in one direction while firing in another, used debris as shields, and even shut down its engines to drift quietly past enemy formations before powering up again with guns blazing. Governor Thomas watched from the colony as the tide of battle shifted. Where before there had been only retreat and despair, now there was a real fight. The remaining colonists cheered each time another Dark Swarm ship fell to the chaotic assault. One of the colonial captains had an idea. He loaded his cargo hold with mining explosives and asked for permission to try something crazy. Walker's response was immediate. The crazier the better. In fact, I'll help you make it even crazier. The Thunderchild's guns cleared a path, letting the cargo ship get close to the largest remaining Dark Swarm vessel. Instead of detonating its explosive cargo directly, the colonial captain took inspiration from the humans. He used the explosives to create a field of debris, which the Thunderchild's weapons then superheated into a cloud of plasma that washed over the biological ship like a solar flare. The Dark Swarm hive mind was now in full retreat. More than half their ships were destroyed or disabled, and they couldn't find any pattern in the attacks to counter. Every time they thought they understood what the human ship would do next, it did something completely different. Walker wasn't done yet. All ships, execute random jump maneuvers on my mark. Don't tell anyone where you're going. Just pick a spot and go. Let's see how their hive mind handles 20 different targets, all jumping in different directions. The space around New Haven Colony lit up as ships began jumping in and out, appearing in one spot only to vanish and reappear somewhere else seconds later. The Dark Swarm formation broke completely, their remaining ships shooting blindly at targets that wouldn't stay still. The hive mind is losing control, Tom reported excitedly. Their ships, they're starting to act independently. They don't know what to do without unified guidance. Walker permitted herself a small nod of satisfaction. Time to finish this. All ships, pick your targets. Let's show them why you should never underestimate humans or their friends. The battle was far from over, but for the first time since the Dark Swarm attacked, victory seemed possible. And more importantly, the colony ships weren't just surviving anymore. They were learning to fight in a whole new way. The asteroid belt near New Haven Colony had always been a nuisance for ships trying to navigate the system. Now, under Captain Walker's guidance, It became a weapon. The Thunderchild's engines roared as it led the counterattack, diving between the massive rocks with impossible precision. "All ships, target the asteroids I'm marking," Walker commanded. "Don't shoot the Dark Swarm directly. Shoot the rocks near them. Trust me on this." The colony ships followed her lead, their weapons striking carefully chosen asteroids. The impact sent chunks of rock flying in all directions, creating a deadly field of moving debris. The Dark Swarm ships, designed to absorb energy weapons and biological attacks, found their living hulls being torn apart by simple rocks moving at high speeds. "Keep moving randomly," Walker urged as she took the Thunderchild through a series of wild spins and turns. "Don't let them predict where you'll be. Let the asteroids do the work for you." In the colony's defense station, Tom Reed watched in amazement as his sensors showed the Dark Swarm formation breaking apart completely. Their ships were scattering, trying to escape the storm of rock and metal. Without their usual perfect coordination, they were running into each other, making mistakes. "They're panicking," he realized. "Their hive mind can't handle this many random elements at once." The Thunderchild demonstrated another new tactic, using its guns to superheat asteroids until they exploded, creating waves of plasma and molten rock. The Dark Swarm's biological armor, so effective against normal weapons, offered little protection against the intense heat. One of the colony ship captains, flying an old mining vessel, got an idea. "Captain Walker, our ships have mining lasers. They're not weapons, but—" "Do it," Walker responded immediately. "Use them to cut up the bigger asteroids. The more chaos, the better." Soon the battlefield was filled with mining lasers slicing through space rocks, creating even more debris for the Dark Swarm to deal with. The hive mind, trying to process thousands of small threats at once, began to show signs of overload. Governor Thomas watched from the colony as the Dark Swarm's largest ships started to retreat. Their smaller vessels, cut off from the hive mind's guidance by all the interference, flew in confused patterns. "They're running," he asked in disbelief. "The Dark Swarm never run. They've never faced humans before," Walker replied over the comm. Her voice carried a hint of pride. "And humans don't fight fair. We use everything we can get our hands on." The Thunderchild demonstrated this philosophy by executing a maneuver that seemed suicidal. It charged straight at a cluster of Dark Swarm ships, but instead of firing its weapons, it used its engines to push a massive asteroid ahead of it like a battering ram. The Dark Swarm vessels scattered, their usual perfect formation forgotten. As they moved, the colony ships picked them off one by one. Without the hive mind's coordination, the biological ships were far less effective. "Look," Tom shouted from his station. "Their command ship, it's trying to escape." The massive Dark Swarm vessel, easily 3 times the size of the Thunderchild, was indeed turning away from the battle. Its surface rippled with patterns of distress, broadcasting confusion to its smaller ships. "Oh no you don't," Walker said quietly. "All ships, clear me a path. Time to show them one last human trick." The colony ships moved aside as the Thunderchild lined up its shot, but instead of firing directly at the Dark Swarm command ship, Walker had her gunners target a specific pattern of asteroids. The rocks exploded in sequence, creating a chain reaction that sent a wave of debris and energy washing over the biological vessel. The command ship's hull began to break apart, its living tissue unable to handle the multiple types of damage at once. The effect on the remaining Dark Swarm ships was immediate. Without their leader's guidance, they began to drift aimlessly. "This is for New Haven," Walker broadcast on all frequencies, "and for every other colony you've attacked. Remember this day. Remember what happened when you faced humanity." The battle wasn't quite over, but in the colony below, people were already celebrating. They had just witnessed something unprecedented. The Dark Swarm in full retreat, their unbeatable tactics shattered by human ingenuity and determination. The remaining Dark Swarm ships fled the system in complete disorder, their once perfect formation now scattered like leaves in the wind. Pieces of their biological vessels drifted among the asteroids, along with the debris from their shattered command ship. The space around New Haven colony, which hours ago had seemed lost to the enemy, now belonged to the defenders. The Thunderchild hung in orbit above the colony, its hull bearing scars from the intense battle. Captain Walker stood at her command station, watching as rescue ships moved to help the damaged colony vessels. "Send to all frequencies," she ordered. "This is Captain Walker. The Dark Swarm have been driven from this system. New Haven colony is safe. I repeat, New Haven is safe." Cheers erupted throughout the colony's biodomes. People who had been hiding in bunkers emerged to see the night sky filled with friendly ships instead of hostile ones. Governor Thomas walked out onto his command center's observation deck, looking up at the Thunderchild with tears in his eyes. "I never thought I'd see the day," he said quietly. "The Dark Swarm, running away. No one's ever made them do that before." In the defense station, Tom Reed was finally able to leave his post. His hand shook as he saved the battle data, knowing that this would be studied for years to come. The sensors had recorded everything. How a single human ship had changed the course of what should have been a hopeless fight. The colony ships gathered around the Thunderchild, their crews still amazed by what they had accomplished. One by one, their captains reported in, sharing stories of what they'd learned about fighting the Dark Swarm. "Captain Walker," one of them called, "will you teach us more about how humans fight?" Walker smiled as she responded, "That's the thing about human tactics. They're not just about fighting. They're about thinking differently, using everything around you, and never giving up even when the odds seem impossible." The rescue efforts continued through the night. The Thunderchild's crew helped repair the colony's defenses, showing them how to modify their shields against biological weapons. Engineers from the human ship worked with colony technicians, upgrading their systems with new ideas that no one had thought of before. Jack Cooper, the militia leader, walked through the colony's main dome, watching as people began to rebuild. Children pointed excitedly at the Thunderchild through the dome's transparent sections, asking their parents if they could be spaceship captains when they grew up. "Things will be different now," he said to his team. "The Dark Swarm won't think of us as easy targets anymore. They'll remember what happened here." Governor Thomas called a meeting with Captain Walker in the colony's main hall. Representatives from all the ships that had fought in the battle attended, eager to learn from the human commander. "What you showed us today wasn't just about military power," Thomas said, addressing the gathered crowd. "It was about innovation, about thinking in ways our enemies can't predict. The Dark Swarm were stronger, but you proved that strength isn't everything." Walker nodded. "Humans learned a long time ago that it's not always the biggest or strongest who wins. It's often the ones who can adapt, who can think of new solutions to old problems. That's what we brought to this fight. Not just weapons, but ideas." News of the battle spread quickly through the nearby systems. Other colonies requested human military advisors, wanting to learn these new tactics. The Dark Swarm, for their part, added humanity to their list of species to avoid, marking them as unpredictable and dangerous. As the sun rose over New Haven colony the next morning, the Thunderchild prepared to depart. There were other colonies to protect, other battles that might need human innovation. But they left behind more than just a safe colony. They left hope, and the knowledge that even the most fearsome enemy could be defeated with courage, creativity, and the willingness to try the impossible. "Remember," Walker broadcast one last time before her ship jumped away, "the greatest human weapon isn't our technology or our ships. It's our ability to think differently, to do the unexpected. That's something any species can learn, if they're brave enough to try." The people of New Haven watched the Thunderchild disappear into hyperspace, knowing that the galaxy had changed. Humanity had arrived on the galactic stage, not just as another spacefaring race, but as a force that could change the rules of the game itself.